ready to begin our second session. You've received a challenge. Now what? Led by Joyce McIntosh. Joyce McIntosh is the Assistant Program Director for the Freedom to Read Foundation, FTRF, an organization dedicated to the First Amendment education, litigation, and advocacy. She has worked at the intersection of intellectual freedom and communication and the First Amendment for 3 decades. Her background in education and journalism and library and information sciences have led her to work for newspapers, nonprofits, and, for the last 2 decades, in libraries. She worked in a public library outside of Chicago, Illinois, providing reference, programming, outreach, and assistive technology before joining FTRF. With FTRF and the American Library Association, her work is focused on education about the First Amendment and censorship, and helping librarians navigate their challenges in school and public libraries. Thank you so much for being here, Joyce. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you for inviting me. Let me see. Let me go ahead and start my slides. Can you see the screen, or do you see kind of everything? Do you see the appropriate screen filling the slide filling the screen?
We see your notes, Joyce.
Okay.
If you hit share again, there should be the presentation mode there.
How is this?
Perfect. Beautiful.
All right, well, go ahead and get started. Thank you for inviting me this afternoon. And Steph and Amanda, thank you so much for the first presentation. That was helpful and perfect for laying this out. And I'll try not to repeat too much of the great info that you've already shared. This tells you who I am and what I am, but I have to share what I am not. I'm not an attorney. So anything that I say this afternoon is information as opposed to legal advice. So we're going to kick right off and jump in where Steph and Amanda left off. We're going to look at why those policies are needed and what you can do once a challenge takes place. And really, one of the first things you need to do is evaluate what's actually happening. In some instances, you might find a person just needs to talk to someone and be heard. I had a patron come up to me once and like thrust a book in my face and say, "Did you know there's swearing in here?" And it was like Bill Bryson or something. I actually didn't know there was swearing in there. She didn't need to go to the extent of a challenge. She just needed to talk to someone and be heard. A person may actually just be asking us a question. They may be angry about a title or topic. They may be needing to speak with someone who's a director. Quite often, someone will come in and the first person they see is putting books back on the shelf. So often it's identifying the proper person for someone to talk to. You may have a case where you've been sent a list of 200 books that people want removed. You may be receiving a Freedom of Information Act request. You may be going into a First Amendment audit if someone is getting in your face, kind of being combative and filming the whole thing. So one thing we need to do is evaluate what is taking place. And then once we've identified what is taking place, it's good to understand what policies are going to be applicable in this moment. I've listed many of the policies that Steph and Amanda talked about. The one thing I want to note here is that when we think patron privacy, some of us are thinking, oh, I'm not going to tell you what your brother-in-law has checked out. Some people are like, even though this boy thinks you're really cute, I'm not going to give him your phone number. But there needs to be 2 privacy policies. One, privacy of our patron or user records. The second one would be a data privacy policy. And that would say when we sign up with organizations to get their databases, how much information are we giving them of our users? And as Steph and Amanda mentioned, our mission statement, our policies, and our ought to include intellectual freedom statements. So we need to think when we receive that challenge, does it relate to one of these? It is so much better and easier to focus on the actual problem and what is taking place than to get stressed about the person or the mental space that they are in. And that brings me to what you do when the situation is that someone is right there in front of you, upset. Before you do either of those first two steps, I always like to talk about the importance of de-escalating a situation. And I go through this because I tend to get stressed out when other people are getting stressed out. If they get louder, I start getting louder. And instead, I need to go through this list and think, it's okay to listen, but not agree. I don't have to nod and say, oh, yeah, I'm with you, when I may not be. I can just listen. I can deflate the conversation by literally bringing it down, bringing my tone down. If I'm in an area where other people are around and I feel comfortable, I can say, let's sit down and talk about this. If I'm not able to do that, I can step away and say, please hold on a moment. I'm going to go get my manager, or I'm going to get the librarian in charge. Another part of de-escalating is creating a healthy boundary between work, personal time, social media, etc. Many of us, whether we're in an urban or rural area, are living where we work. We might be sitting next to this person on Saturday night or Sunday morning. We might have kids in the same programs. And so it's important to be able to say, you know what, I'm not actually on the clock right now. Thank you for bringing this concern up. Here's when you can bring it to our director, or here's what you can do. In order to keep that relationship positive, or at least amicable, it's important to have those boundaries. And then always know within your library, what is the safety plan? What is the plan for if you're the librarian in charge and someone comes in and they're angry? Do you have another staff person who's going to take care of things? Basically, know what the plan is and be able to follow up with it. And reaching back to our last hour here, know those policies. Know when it's appropriate to call the police. Know when it's appropriate to just handle something on the spot. So I just want to talk about de-escalation always. All right. And then if you've de-escalated, you've received, your challenge in one of those forms, what's the next step? You need to think about what the response is that's needed. Does this person just need an email saying, here's our policy, here's our form, you're welcome to fill it out, and we don't have a challenge unless you've filled out the whole form? Who needs to be involved? Is this a case where the head of your reference section or your collections development person can just send an email sharing the policy, saying, here's what we can do? Or does it need to be escalated? Do your trustees need to know? And then please report. I ask you to report the challenge, whether you want assistance or not. So at the Office for Intellectual Freedom at ALA, we do keep a database of challenges, and it's helpful for us to understand what is taking place where in the country. And you don't have to ask for help, and you can do it anonymously. So I encourage you to be familiar with the challenge reporting tool. And when we send out slides, you'll have that live link. So this is currently the list of checkboxes in the challenge reporting tool. Until several years ago, that first line, that blue line, is this a book, a movie, a magazine, or digital content? That was it. Unfortunately, we're in a world now where we have so many other situations. And if it's other, then please note that as well. But this kind of relates to that first slide where now challenges come in many varieties. We can link them to our policies, and there is a way to navigate any one of these. What I understand is hard for all of us working in libraries is that on any given day, we need to be ready for the one patron who says, I don't like Harry Potter. If you read it, you're going to hell. It's witchcraft. And we have a one-on-one conversation. Or we need to be ready for an organized group circumventing our policies and saying, I don't like this topic, get rid of them all. Or we need to be prepared for legislated censorship. How are we going to handle it? How will we help inform people in our state? And what do we need to know how to navigate that? So we do need to have an awareness of different types and be ready on any given day to have any of these conversations. So next, you seek help. And I put a picture of a waterfall here because frankly, the next few minutes may feel like a deluge of resources. Please know that again, we're including the links. I'll go through each one. And I think you may see as you look at this list that some are a good fit for different situations. And it's good to have all of these on hand as a resource. So I sort of view our associated organizations here, the Freedom to Read Foundation and the Office for Intellectual Freedom, as a bike tire. And we have spokes that can reach throughout the entire country. So wherever you are at, whatever type of library you are at, there are avenues for support. And I know this is a bunch of acronyms, but we'll get to each one. No, it is not a typo that I put the Merit Fund on there twice. I just feel like it's that critical. So I'll explain that in a moment. All right. Sources of support through ALA and our affiliated organizations. The Freedom to Read Foundation is a separate nonprofit from ALA, focused on First Amendment education, litigation, and advocacy. Right now, litigation is truly the thing that sets us apart. Litigation has become one of the most successful ways to stop censorship by going to court. And it used to be maybe we'd have 3 cases a year. Now we're involved in over a dozen. The Freedom to Read Foundation is a wonderful organization. I encourage you to take a look and get familiar with us. If you are in a challenge and someone says, hey, I have this student and their parents, and they're ready to go to court. They want to do this. They wish they had access to a book. It's been removed. The Freedom to Read Foundation would be a good approach. ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom, we are here to support you through challenge support, through education initiatives, through reporting. The wonderful graphics that Amanda and Steph shared are from the Office for Intellectual Freedom, and we track censorship, and we have other publications. Often the Freedom to Read Foundation or the Office for Intellectual Freedom can write a letter of support. Say that your board of trustees has done something egregious. They haven't followed their policies, or they've decided they want all LGBTQ books out of the library. or they're saying there should be no, there should be no BIPOC or LGBTQ content in the children's area. At that point, reach out, ask for help, and we will also sometimes write a letter to a board of trustees saying, you don't want to go down this road. If you are practicing viewpoint discrimination, you may end up in court. You most likely will not win. And here's a list of how very expensive censorship can be. Wouldn't you rather be spending money on acquiring new books, having more programs, enjoying story times, and on and on? So our organizations do work together to fight censorship. I love United for Libraries. I hope some of you on this call are library trustees. United for Libraries is the entity that works within ALA on behalf of trustees, and I encourage you to take a look at the Trustee Code of Ethics. I will have to remember to include that link. That is a great resource as far as reminding trustees, have them sign it annually, that explains that they have to uphold their fiduciary duty, focus on setting aside their personal viewpoint, and uphold patrons' First Amendment right to access information. So I encourage you to look at United also. All of these organizations are involved in education. If you need help at your library, give us a call. We'll connect you to a member leader in your area and get you set up with intellectual freedom training. Unite Against Book Bans is a fantastic initiative started a couple of years ago when we realized that as librarians, we can't always shoulder this. And sometimes we can't stick our neck out. We may be afraid we're going to get fired. Unite Against Book Bans is a wonderful grassroots community advocacy tool. Nonpartisan statistics and great talking points. Please look up Unite Against Book Bans. When you look that up, look up book resumes. If some of you are sitting there right now at your computer, type uniteagainstbookbans.org and click on book resumes. This is fantastic because many of the books that are challenged, there's a PDF of it. You can read the reviews there. You don't have to go out and try to compile them all if you're in the middle of a challenge. You can read any awards or honors that the book has received. You can see where the publisher or the author recommend cataloging it, how they recommend cataloging it, where they recommend shelving it. It is a wonderful time-saving tool. Please take a look at that. And then finally, the Merit Fund. I'm highlighting this because it's another fund that is separate from ALA. It's not part of the Freedom to Read Foundation or ALA. It is a separate fund that was set up for library workers who are either experiencing discrimination in the workplace or their job is threatened due to their defense of intellectual freedom. They can apply for the fund. They can get a grant that will cover retaining an attorney, or maybe it will cover insurance for the month or housing. And if they need more, they can reapply. So I encourage you to be aware of the fund. If you can, please support the Merit Fund. Similar to the Freedom to Read Foundation's legal work, the Merit Fund used to be maybe one person would apply a year. Now we have many more experiencing challenges. So please take a look at the Merit Fund, pass it on if you know someone in need, and if you can, support it. All right, I'm going to share two more resources here that are sort of internal to ALA. The Intellectual Freedom Helplines. A year ago, we set up, I believe it's 10 states, or there are now 17 helplines throughout the country. So some are regional helplines. And this is where these groups received grant funding to set up a helpline in their state. The folks there are trained on how to work with people going through challenges. They work in conjunction with Office for Intellectual Freedom staff if needed, but it's a way for us to get you local help. The reason why this is so critical is I know that often you understand your community and your library and the dynamics much more than our ALA staff would, because we may be located in different areas. Although we do have someone in California and Pennsylvania and Illinois and New York, but with the intellectual freedom helplines, you can talk to somebody who is in your state or local area or region, and they can help you with the challenge process. Recently, we have added members to that. So these are people who have either worked with ALA's Policy Corps, or they're already member leaders who are doing some work, and they have said, hey, we want to be part of this. So we're glad to connect you with helpline people in your state, and I'm also glad to send you a list of those states and share that. The other programs, which I'm so glad to highlight and are a great support. The first one is Law for Librarians. Last year we started a cohort, and it included a public school librarian and a public librarian in every state. There were a few states where we didn't hit both, but the goal was to have representatives, school and public, in every state. They went through a weekend-long training on how to help people through problems, how to network with attorneys in their state, how to lead training sessions in their state. Again, the goal is to have you have help from people who know what's going on near you. And we're beginning the second cohort now. So we will be up, hopefully, knock on wood, to approaching 4 people in every state who can help out. And we're beginning a new program, Lawyers for Libraries, where we're going to be talking to lawyers throughout the country and trying to increase the network of lawyers who understand censorship and what's going on in libraries. So to learn about those 2 initiatives, or those 3 initiatives, go to ala.org/OIF. They are projects through our Office for Intellectual Freedom. So there are many ways for us to help you internally, but I also want to talk about some of the practical resources. And again, I'm going to try not to overlap too much with what Steph and Amanda shared. Okay, so there's local external support outside of your library or school. When you get a challenge, and I actually no, not when you get a challenge, before you get a challenge. Before you get a challenge, make sure that you have all of those policies in place, nailed down, and that your staff understand them. And I mean, by staff, I'm talking everyone from your custodian to your executive director. So know the policies ahead of time. That's the best way to approach a challenge. The second best way is to have your support in place now. Do that networking, communicating, understand who your allies are and who your friends are. Be aware of what friends, families, and colleagues you can talk to. There are state leaders who you can reach out to. In fact, if we share a letter of support and it's a state where we know we've worked with the head of the library association there, both the Freedom to Read Foundation and Office for Intellectual Freedom will always talk to the state director and say, are you aware of this? This is what we're doing. Will you also be sharing a letter? We work together. There's also state intellectual freedom committee members who can do that. If you're at a school, is your union friendly? Is your union representative supportive? They can be a great help at making sure that those policies are followed through on and that you're represented. They often understand the legal process and they don't want to end up in it. Know your library attorney. In some of our cases, it's our county attorney, right? Or our city or village attorney. They may not understand libraries. So it's helpful to know if there is a supportive library attorney nearby. It's also good to know if you're in a situation, you may need a personal attorney. It may be an HR situation, it may be a censorship situation, but that's another one where feel free to reach out and we can talk to you and determine what makes the most sense. But have an awareness ahead of time. So again, know those community members who are supportive. If you're at the public library, know your school librarians. If you're a school librarian, know if you have supportive public librarians or if there's a college nearby. Often faith communities can be very supportive. I'm glad to share that the Unite Against Book Bans campaign has several faith-based organizational partners that can be a source of support. And then I want to, I'm adding in all the acronyms. Here we go. But I want to note that we also work in conjunction with these organizations. We work with the National Coalition Against Censorship. We work with the National Council of Teachers of English. NCTE has a wonderful intellectual freedom center. And if the challenge is based more on curriculum than on libraries, then we look to NCAC and NCTE as great resources. And of course, I don't want to forget American Booksellers, Writers Guild of America, West and East. And I want to bring up the ACLU and other regional organizations. Right now, so much censorship is focused on LGBTQ content or on people and authors of color. The ACLU is often a good partnership for fighting censorship and supporting people who are being marginalized. I'd also be aware if you have local NAACP or PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender groups. These organizations can often work with you in a moment of community advocacy. So before I move on, I want to just talk a moment about that piece. So you have identified the challenge. You've determined if it needs to be a 3-alarm thing or if you just have to have a conversation. You've determined if you need support. But one way that's always great to have support is by helping community members, not necessarily the library workers, stand up and advocate for you. So if you can identify those patrons or parents in your community, have them work together, saying, hey, organize around Unite Against Book Bans is a great way, and show up to meetings. Show up to meetings prepared to talk about what you love about the library. Show up to meetings prepared to share the library's policies and why it's important to leave these items on the shelf. Show up with them having talking points ready to go. And that way you know that you always have someone you can call up and they will be in your corner. If it is a stressful and dynamic situation and you need help or a letter of support, please reach out to the ALA Office for Intellectual Freedom. You can call us, you can fill out a report. If you're filling out a report, I encourage you to use a personal email so that the information in your organization can't be FOIA'd with a Freedom of Information Act request. Again, you can remain anonymous if that's important to you keeping your job. We are here to help. So, all right, we're ready for anything, and you can be too. It just, hopefully that didn't feel like too much of a deluge of information. But I'm glad to pull up our chat and pull up our Q&A and take a look at that. Let me see, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see our Q&A box. Does that work okay, Grace?
Definitely.
Okay, I have stopped sharing and now I can see our Q&A box. Very good. And let me get the chat up to see if I missed any comments there. Okay, let me pull up our Q&A. All right. So should we report challenges where it turns out we made a mistake and it was in the wrong collection? If we had a graphic novel, etc. That doesn't, no, I don't think you would need to. It seems like the patron was thinking the right thing and you reviewed it and went through your process and said, you know what, yeah, it really does belong somewhere else. You can report it, but you don't have to. I would almost say no, just because everyone understands it doesn't need to be. That's similar to when we get a challenge report at our public library and the person says, this information is inaccurate, it's incorrect, I can't believe you have it. We look at it and it's 30 years old and it is outdated, and yes, we need to weed it. That's the beauty of intellectual freedom. We each have the right to say, I don't think this belongs here, and we must provide that review as part of the challenge process. And sometimes we do find out exactly what you said there, that it doesn't belong there or it should have been weeded and we need to do something different. Let me see what the next question is here. Resources or support for Canadian librarians. Canadian librarians are more than welcome to reach out to us. We would give similar support. And I know that I believe we do have several colleagues in Canada who we sometimes work with who focus on intellectual freedom. So we would reach out and involve them as well. But we don't have separate resources. Yes, absolutely. All of these resources are available to all types of libraries. And if you go to the Office for Intellectual Freedom or the ALA website and look up policy samples, etc., we have samples for every type of policies, right? For academia, public libraries, public schools. More and more in the last year, we have worked with people at special libraries, at university libraries. Sometimes those end up being an HR situation, even though it's also related to intellectual freedom. Oh, and thank you. Heather just posted a trustees link. So yes, we definitely want to have that up there as well, that trustees can get support, not just library workers. Someone said occasionally we find random slips of paper in the random sections of book that say the Holocaust didn't happen. I would. I don't know if I'd say a crime. Someone's certainly exercising their First Amendment right in a really horrible and negative way. But please report it, because then we understand, hey, this is happening in this area. And sometimes you may not be connected with all of the libraries in that area, and it may be happening repeatedly, and we can see a pattern. So that would be helpful. And I'm sorry that that's happening too. It's kind of similar to those that, check out every book on a topic or turn the book around so you can't see the spine. Let me see. Do I have another open one there? Or Grace, would you like me to address some of the questions earlier in the chat? Or am I missing anything below?
No, let's start with those questions that were submitted prior to the event, and then more folks may come in with questions while we're answering those.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the first question, I'm eager to answer this one because it is in fact Banned Books Week, which is why you're here. And I might add, thank you for being here and spending this time with us this afternoon. How do I get my institution to let me celebrate Banned Books Week? In the last few years, with the increase in censorship, a lot of libraries have chosen to not celebrate Banned Books Week, or they've been told you're not allowed, can't do it. We encourage them to celebrate a more accessible way. Perhaps, in fact, if you look at the last few years at campaigns, I love Censorship is So 1984, Read for Your Rights. Last year we had Let Freedom Read. So there are ways to highlight access to information. This is a week to let freedom read. This is a week for highlighting that we all have a right to choose. So if you are being told, hey, we can't celebrate Banned Books Week, say, hey, let's have Let Freedom Read Week. How about that? And then you can include banned books, or you can include education in there. Thank you, Heather, for sharing the Banned Books Week resources, and other programs will be in there. How do you handle book challenges that come from within your organization? In other words, teachers, admin, library assistants. I worked at a library in the suburbs of Chicago where several things happened. We had a library staff member who saw a person checking out the red tent, and that staff member chose to, lean across the circulation desk and share the good news with her. That was a time when that situation called for education about the Library Bill of Rights, the ALA Code of Ethics. And we ended up adding those to our staff onboarding packet, saying, look, as a staff member in a limited public forum set aside by our government for every person in this community, we have to set aside our personal interests and viewpoints and provide access for every person. And you can talk to your neighbor or the patron about the weather, about the beautiful day, but you're certainly going to tell that staff member, you cannot look and say, oh my God, are you getting a divorce? So again, that is key. Sometimes it is staff education. Teachers and administration, that can get very challenging, right? Because I understand that if your principal or superintendent says, pull out everything on this, you may feel like you're going to lose your job if you do that. That's one of those times where it's important to understand ahead, is my union rep supportive of me or not? Are there supportive parents in the community? Are those parents willing to come to the next board meeting and say, my kid wanted to check this out of the school library. Why isn't it there? Well, you understand that it has to be there. Children don't lose their First Amendment rights, right, when they walk into school. So when challenges come from within, it's important to look at those policies, look at your staff employment, policies, make sure everyone understands them because it's part of doing their job. Or it's important at that point to look at the policies and tell the person in that school district, I don't want to break the policy. This is why. It puts us at risk for a lawsuit. Then do what you have to do. We absolutely never tell anyone to risk their job unless it's something they want to do and they're prepared to do it. Instead, it's like, okay, you had to pull A, B, and C title. Make sure you have a similar title that you can share and look at possible next steps for getting community support or additional external support. Okay, let me see if we had, do we have any other chat questions or Q&A questions, or should I go share another of these previous questions that our attendees asked?
No other additional questions. So we have about 3 minutes left. So let's just continue on. These are really helpful. Thank you, Joyce.
Okay, great. Let me see. How can libraries promote Banned Books Week in cautious environments where political or DEI themes may be restricted? Right now, that is such a challenging question, and many of us are experiencing it. In regards to DEI themes, that's one of them where I would remind people to do what you can. Have the important works in that collection. Have materials for every patron. So make sure that you are still continuing to collect materials that people need and that they want. Again, you might not want to call it Banned Books Week, or you may not be able to celebrate it in this time, but you'll still need to have the content. I recently shared a program at a university near where I live, and I was told ahead of time that the program was going to focus on, I'm trying to remember what it was, building community. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And it was something like building community within the X name of university environment. And I thought, well, how do I fit in here? I'm not sure I understand. And they had to change names of their programs because they were too related to DEI and they didn't want to lose funding. So they said, look, just so you know, we want you to talk about censorship, about intellectual freedom, about the First Amendment and how it ties in with libraries. We just need to do it with different language. And that's one of those times where I'm like, I will show up and I will do that. We need to still provide the content. We need to still provide the access to information. And we still need to respect the First Amendment right. I don't think that, okay, I've got one more note that I was going to share on the last slide. If you noticed, I shared that big waterfall and behind it was a rainbow. Let me share what the rainbow is. I have hope every morning. Sometimes when we get a flood of challenges, I'm like, oh man, this is really incredibly heavy. But what gives me hope is that so many of our judges across the country are supporting the First Amendment rights of people to access information. They're supporting the freedom of speech. And for heaven's sakes, they love libraries. People love libraries. They love what we provide. And again, we are set aside by our government to help people access information. And we can do that by continuing the amazing programs and themes and story times and collection development and libraries of things and all the joy that we bring every day. So please note that even though these are heavy topics, there is so much hope every day. And I hope that you are having a smooth week and not running into challenges. But if you are, we'll tackle them together.
Thank you so much, Joyce. That you were just a font of knowledge, so much good information, and what an inspirational note to end on, that hopefully will buoy all of our attendees into good works for the rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here. So glad you can be a support to the librarians that are attending too. So, all right, we're going to take a little break now before our final session, which will be our special author panel. We're very excited about this. We're going to close the chat during this 10-minute break, but we will open it back up again before the next session. While you wait, please enjoy these resources from our sponsor, Penguin Random House Library Marketing.